everyone, I'm back with another video about one of my favorite cities, and tonight I want to talk to you about Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C., as most of you should know, is our capital city. It stands for the District of Columbia. It's located on the eastern seaboard between the states of Virginia and Maryland. It's actually not in either state. And Washington, D.C. was specifically built to be our capital city. In case any of you didn't know that. I have been to Washington, D.C. I think 4 or 5 times maybe. I'm really not sure. The last time I was there was when Megan was 1. She had just turned 1. And Andrew was, so he would have been 8, I think, 8 or 9. And so that's been 13 years since I've been there. And that time we went there by train. We took Amtrak out there. We went in June, and it was extremely hot. Very, very humid and very, very hot. And in most of the pictures, sweat is literally just dripping down our faces, and all our hair is curly kinky because of the humidity. I do not recommend traveling to Washington, D.C. in the summer. It's very, very hot. Because if you don't know, Washington, D.C. was originally like swamp. And so it's a very humid area. Other times that I've been to Washington, D.C., I know I went a couple times as a kid with my dad, but I feel like we were always like on our way to go somewhere else. And like we always went by train. You know, we were like on our way up or down the East Coast or something like that. And then I think we went once when I was like 12, and I think we went another time. I don't remember very well. And then I went by myself a couple of times as a young adult. I went at spring break one year when I was in college to visit my friend Steve, who was a college friend of mine, but his family lived in Potomac, Maryland. And I stayed with their family, and we went to, into the city and did things. And I went another time. I was actually representing my university chapter of Kappa Delta Pi, which is the Education Honor Society, like for people who are going to be teachers. And we had our national convention in Baltimore. And so I flew into Reagan National Airport in Washington, D.C., and then took the train to Baltimore. So I guess that doesn't, other than landing, you can, when you land at Reagan National, you come in really close to the monuments. It's actually really cool. And as opposed to landing at Dulles. But I guess other than flying in and out of Washington, D.C., I didn't actually do anything there. And boy, I think we went one time when I was a teenager too, my dad and I. I don't know why I can't remember this very well. But every time I went, except for the time I was just flying in and out, we were mainly centered on the Central Mall and the key monuments. I would say that the last time we were there was probably the best. I think, as is usual. I don't think my dad did a lot of planning and research when we took trips when I was a kid. I know he didn't. But to some extent, I can't blame him for that, because you have to remember that that was before the internet. And then my daughter and I were just talking about this the other night in the car. Like, I can't even figure out, how did we find out about things before the internet? I mean, we had to get like books and brochures and go to a travel agent and get flyers and stuff, and I guess make a lot of phone calls, because I don't know how we figured out like what existed and where things were, and when things were open and how much stuff cost. I mean, it seems like there would have been a lot of unknowns. And obviously having the internet makes everything so much easier. But also, I just have always been a planner, and I do a much better job of planning and researching things before we go on trips than my dad ever did. So when we went in 2005, June of 2005, which is the last time we were there, I planned the whole thing. We, like I said, we went on Amtrak. We stayed at a hotel right in the city. We were able to walk to things. We did do a hop on, hop off bus tour. And we did then, yeah, I mean, we did all the museums and everything like that we could walk to first or take the hop on, hop off bus tour. And we did all the monuments, you know. We didn't go up in the Washington Monument. The only one in our family who's been to the top of the Washington Monument is Andrew. And he did that on one of his school trips that he took. He went on 2 trips to Washington, D.C. through Education First, through school. One when he was in 7th grade when he went with student council, and the other one when he was like between his freshman, the summer between his freshman and sophomore year of high school with Flags for the Fallen. And on that trip, he actually went to Washington, D.C., Gettysburg, Philadelphia, and New York City. But so he got to go to Washington, D.C. a couple times. But I know on that last trip where he went to all those places, he went to the top of the Washington Monument. None of the rest of us have ever been up there. But we went to, you know, saw the Capitol, saw the White House only from the outside, Supreme Court only from the outside, the World War II Memorial, the Roosevelt Memorial, the Korean War Memorial, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, the Vietnam War Memorial, Jefferson Memorial, Lincoln Memorial, you know, all the stuff along the, and then lots of Smithsonian museums. We've been to many of the Smithsonian museums. We've been to Ford's Theater, which is really cool and interesting. The Spy Museum is really cool. Did we go to the Newseum, which is all about like journalism? Can't remember if we went to that one. You know, there's lots of great museums with the Smithsonian. I mean, the Smithsonian, if you don't know, is not one museum. It's many museums. You know, Air and Space Museum, the Museum of Natural History, the Museum of American History, American Indian Museum. There's just a ton of them. You do have to get, if you want to go to the Capitol or the White House, you have to get tickets through your elected representative. And there's a procedure to go through for that. And you can look that up online. And you have to do it quite a bit in advance. So that's something that you want to be sure to plan for. But the hop-on, hop-off bus tours in Washington, D.C. are excellent. They have both day and nighttime hop-on, hop-off bus tours. There are some areas of Washington, D.C. that are a little sketchy, and you need to be a little bit careful. But for the most part, any place that tourists and visitors are going to go is fine. The subway in Washington, D.C., I always found to be very clean and efficient and easy to use. Although I find those stations slightly creepy. I don't know. Something about that concrete waffle pattern that makes up the ceiling of the subway system, I just always thought was a little weird. That last time we went to, we did rent a car from our car rental place at Union Station, which Union Station in Washington, D.C. itself, the train station, is actually really cool. And there's like a food court in there and stuff. We rented a car from a car rental place at Union Station, and we drove out to Arlington National Cemetery, which I highly recommend, and where the Kennedys are buried, and the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier that's guarded all the time, and the flame and everything is there. And the Iwo Jima Memorial is out that way. And then the Pentagon is out that way. I think you can do tours of the Pentagon. We haven't done that, but I think you can. And then we went to Colonial Williamsburg and Yorktown and Jamestown, which obviously those aren't in Washington, D.C., but they're very close. And I would highly recommend those too. That's the historic triangle. And then we also went to Busch Gardens when we were out there that last time too. Busch Gardens, Williamsburg, which is, it's a very nice park. That's the one that's all, I talked about that in my theme park one video. That's the one that's all themed like different countries in Europe. And it's very lush and green and really pretty. So those are all some cool sites that are nearby Washington, D.C. I know that except for that time, every other time I was there was like winter. So January, February, March, they don't really get snow. I mean, I think sometimes they get snow, but they don't get snow like we get here in Wisconsin. You know, they don't get feet of snow that stays for months on end. I mean, it's November 13th today, and we've had snow covering the ground for a week, 4 days. Well, maybe it's been like 4 days. I don't know. It feels longer already. But you know, they don't get like some, you know, if they get some, they might have it for a little while and it's a little bit and then it melts and whatever. So I remember that it was cold, but it was easier and more pleasant to walk around when it wasn't hot. And obviously, a very popular time to go to Washington, D.C. is in the spring when all the cherry blossoms are blooming. Those cherry blossom trees, those cherry trees were a gift from Japan to our nation. I've never been there for that. Andrew has been there for that, and he took a lot of pictures. But it's apparently amazing and beautiful. However, I don't think that we will ever go then, or at least Ben won't, because Ben has a very severe tree pollen allergy. And so going any place where things are blooming in the spring is torture for poor Ben. So I think another nice time to go to Washington, D.C. would probably be in the fall because the weather would be a little bit cooler and more pleasant. And I don't know if they have what fall colors are like there. Does anybody know what fall colors are like in Washington, D.C.? But I really feel like Washington, D.C. is a city that everybody, well, at least every American, every citizen of the United States of America should visit at some point in your life. Oh, the National Archives is excellent, where you can see the actual Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and all that. We went there too. It's just, there's so much history and significant things that you really should learn about our country. And if you're going to be, an active citizen of this country. Now, granted, I'm a social studies teacher, so promoting, citizenship here. But it's true. I mean, there's things you should learn and see and understand about the history of our nation and the way our government works that are best done by visiting our nation's capital. So I highly recommend that everybody goes to Washington, D.C. at least once in your life. Okay, so that is my favorite city for this video. And I thank you guys so much for watching and for joining me today. And stay tuned, and there's still more of my favorite cities to come. I think I've done 4 now: London, New York, Dublin, Washington, D.C. Yep, so 6 more to go because I'm doing 10. Okay, thank you everyone for joining me. Safe travels.